Good evening, all. I'm Farisa from the Department of Clinical Nutrition and Dietetics. A very warm welcome to this nutrition webinar, which is being done as a part of National Nutrition Month celebration. Now, this session today is actually going to help us understand why and how an optimal diet and healthy lifestyle approach right from the period of adolescence is going to help to improve the health index of the future generation. And hence we have the title, Invest in Good Nutrition, the Best Start in Life. Now, why is this period of preconception that starts months before or years before the pregnancy is so important? Because evidence show that if there is any nutritional inadequacy that can happen during pregnancy or any child defect that can happen that cannot be improved once the woman is pregnant. So this period of preconception gives time to a woman to get over her deficiencies. Also, certain concerns like uncontrolled sugars, high BMI, hypertension, which are all the risk factors for poor pregnancy outcome, can be positively improved. Hence, this period of preconception is very important. And there is also enough evidence today to show that an early exposure of an infant or a child to these diseases will increase the susceptibility of this disease in the adulthood. So we need to remember that if we have a good dietary approach in the adolescent, it is going to help them to produce healthy cells, which are healthy gametes, which are going to transfer the genetic material from the parents to child. Remember, overnutrition or undernutrition both can alter the fetal programming. With this insight, let me take a moment to invite the panelists for today's session. So we have Dr. Lata Shashi, Ms. Asma Sajid, Ms. Sumrana, and Ms. Ravalika, who has joined us for the session today. A very warm welcome to the panelists. Dear viewers, you can keep on posting the questions. The panelists are going to answer them soon. We are going to kickstart the session with our first speaker for today, Ms. Sumrana, and she is going to take us through the journey of adolescence. Sumrana, can you emphasize why the nutritional guidance or the education in the adolescent phase is so important?
So as I was saying adolescence is a period where there is a rapid growth spurt that takes place. It is a vulnerable period of nutrition. Eating disorders develop that might lead to the risk of obesity, diabetes, etc. It is the most influential period. What happens, there are certain types of nutritional inadequacy during this time that leads to many eating disorders as well during this time. So hence the adolescent period is considered as the most important period.
Definitely, Sumrana, adolescence is a phase wherein the young generation is influenced by many factors. You have media, you have celebrities, which impact their lifestyle. Hence, guidance and nutrition education from the right sources is definitely important for them to develop healthy lifestyle. Moving on to the next question, can you let us know what are the common concerns that the adolescents go through?
Yes, these days, many young girls have concerns such as PCOS, hypothyroid, anemia, and overweight, which is quite on an increasing rate these days.
Truly, Sumrana, so the prevalence of PCOS is increasing like anything. There are concerns with acne, hair loss, infertility, weight gain, and hormonal changes. Can you let us know how can a young adult basically manage the PCOS symptoms?
Yes, the dietary intervention and nutritional intervention, what we suggest for the PCOS concern would be first line of treatment. So healthy body weight maintenance is what we want everybody to look out in the concern of PCOS. We would recommend, please don't skip any meals. Have a proper sleep pattern and concentrate on a better hydration as well. Say no to junk foods, avoid any kind of food consisting of high fat, high sugars, etc., such as packaged fruits, packaged drinks, packaged products, etc. In place of that, please try to incorporate fresh fruits and vegetables, which will give you a good amount of antioxidants. Concentrate on the physical activity and exercise. Minimum of 30 minutes has also shown a positive effects on the PCOS. We also want everybody to adopt a concept of mindful eating, that is art of being present while eating. Most of the young adolescents are always on their phones or on watching TV while they eat. So they should be focusing on their meals to reduce the amount of calorie intake, and they should eat when they are hungry and stop when they are full, has also shown a positive impact on the weight management.
Well, Sumrana rightly said, because we see a lot of young girls basically skipping their meals, starving because they think that they're going to lose weight doing so. But we would like to know from you, like, what are the ways by which we can healthily have the weight management?
Some of the ways that we recommend for young adolescents would be, please don't go for any kind of crash diets or fat diets. If you want to have a consistent weight loss, please be disciplined and have the patience. And for a consistent weight loss, we would recommend from the dietary aspect, go with a low calorie diet and concentrate on the exercise and the physical activity. Have a realistic goals planned for you rather than the unexpected goals that you're going to set across. With this, all these things, I would recommend that our state a phrase that anybody who goes through an adolescent period is a hero. In fact, seeing all the changes and all the concerns a once goes through in the adolescence.
Truly, Sumrana. So any crash diet or fat diet can be really motivating because it causes a rapid weight loss. But you see, even we see that most of the times they get back to their original weight. So it's not about crash dieting. It is all about having consistency, having patience, having realistic weight loss target goals, so that this is a lifestyle modification and they can maintain that consistent weight loss. Thank you, Sumrana. You have actually simplified PCOS management, and this can actually benefit many. With this, we move towards our next speaker, Ms. Ravalika, and she is now going to guide us to the journey of preconception and conception. Welcome, Ravalika. Ravalika, if we see, it is basically a dream of every mother to have a healthy baby, healthy pregnancy, risk-free pregnancy. But let us know, what is the preparation that is required in the period of preconception to have a healthy pregnancy outcome?
There would be a lot of mothers who, once they got conceived or once they hear the good news, would be very much anxious about their diet, what diet they have to take, what are the dietary changes that they have to incorporate to have a healthy pregnancy and for the growth of their baby. But what they have to understand here is the preparation starts much before the pregnancy. So all the interventions, including dietary modifications, having a healthy balanced diet with inclusion of good amount of micro and macronutrients, especially folic acid, which helps to prevent any birth defects for the baby, along with which lifestyle modifications also has to be considered. Simple changes in maintaining proper timings of meals and getting good sleep and ensuring adequate physical activity and minimizing on sedentary activities and attaining healthy BMI also helps. It's always good to start pregnancy with a healthy BMI. It is also shown that pre-pregnancy BMI and the weight gain in pregnancy has been showing effect on the baby birth. So that's the reason all this factor would be contributing for a healthy pregnancy and for the growth of child.
Definitely, Ravalika. That's the reason you see, like, most of the women who are anxious to conceive or planning a pregnancy, the folic acid supplementation is started months before, because the deficiency of folic acid in pregnancy in the early phase itself can cause neural tube defects, and that cannot be altered in pregnancy.
Yes.
Well, and also rightly said about the healthy BMI, because when you start your pregnancy with a healthy weight, that prevents the risk of various complications like gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, and gestational hypertension. Ravalika, moving on to the period of conception, can you let us know few nutrients or the food groups which are important in pregnancy and whose deficiency can actually impact the maternal and the fetal outcome?
There are plethora of nutrients that would be contributing for healthy pregnancy and fetal outcome and helping in baby's growth. So if you can see here, omega-3 fats, folic acid, vitamin C, or protein, calcium, selenium, B complex, all these vitamins and minerals and other nutrients would be contributing definite way to increase the better fetal development. So like example, if I have to say, protein helps to give that enzymes for the baby for developing good hormone system as well, and calcium would be helping in developing fetal bone development. So any of the nutrient would be contributing for healthy pregnancy and better fetal development.
So this slide is a clear interpretation for us to understand that it is not just one food,
Yes.
like just carbs or proteins, but it is a complete balanced diet and optimal diet with different food groups in the portion sizing as recommended that is actually going to improve the pregnancy outcome.
Yes.
Ravalika, sometimes we see a dip in the hemoglobin in the pregnancy because of the blood volume being expanded to supply to the baby as well. And
Yes.
anemia is quite prevalent. So, and we also know that this anemic status of the mother can lead to the low birth weight baby, as will increase the risk of, you can say, anemia when the child grows up. Can you let us know few easy ways by which we can improve the quality of the diet and the hemoglobin of the mother?
Anemia is one of the common concerns in pregnancy. So few diet modifications that a woman who is anemic can do is inclusion of good quality protein in the form of soya beans or egg or lean meat products, lentils, and also including good amount of dark green leaf vegetables and dry fruits. And one thing that they have to understand here is for better iron absorption also, they have to take good amount of vitamin C rich foods. So inclusion of tomatoes, bell peppers, or citrus fruits like guava, all this also helps in better iron absorption. Some of the cooking methods or the preparation method of food also helps in better absorption of iron. Like example, if I have to say beans, they can do the well sprouting and then soaking and cooking. All these techniques also would be helping in better iron absorption. And for vegans, it is suggested to advise on B12 supplementation. And one more thing that they have to understand here is any food containing components like tannins or phytates would be inhibiting the iron absorption. They will not allow the iron absorption from the diet. So if they are wishing to take so, there should be minimal of 1 to 2 hour gap between the meals and this food intake.
This is a good point that you actually brought up because we see a lot of people having tea with the breakfast itself. So that hinders the iron absorption. And also this makes me to understand that a bowl of sprout salad with different colorful vegetables and a dash of lime would be a better snack option rather than grabbing biscuits, which are mostly refined wheat flour and fat. One more major nutrient that we would like to hear from you, Ravalika, is about fat. So we would like to know the facts about fat. What is the recommendation of fat in pregnancy? Because there are two different groups. One who go overboard, lots of ghee, lots of laddus, right? And then there is the other group who would like to avoid it. What do the guidelines say about it?
Fats are not always unhealthy. They have to be educated about the type of fat that that they are using in their diet. So it is all about omega-3, omega-6, and DHA fatty acids, which helps in supporting fetal growth, especially in the development of brain and retina of the fetus. So inclusion of foods like safflower oil, sunflower oil, canola oil, nuts and oil seeds, and fishes are also very good source of omega-3 and omega-6 fats. So they can include all this for supporting better fetal development.
So fats are important. Healthy fats should be included. Omega-3 fats coming from nuts, seeds, and plant oils basically improve the fetal growth. That's a good thing.
Yes.
Now, this brings me to a point wherein I would like to seek Dr. Lata's expertise here. Dr. Lata, sometimes there is a concern of FGR, fetal growth retardation in pregnancy. So what women usually believe or tend to do is they think that to overcome this, they have to eat a lot, which increases their BMI, or sometimes they use supplements which are loaded with proteins. What does the evidence say about it?
Fetal growth restriction, or in other words, intrauterine growth restriction, happens as a result of multiple factors, which in turn leads to placental insufficiency and hence decreased nutrients transferred to the fetus. It is actually the nutritional status of the mother prior to pregnancy and during pregnancy that plays that vital role in fetal growth and development. So, If there is a deficiency in the protein energy intake of the pregnant mother, which is of course assessed by a qualified dietitian, then including supplements may be beneficial. There is no conclusive evidence that just increasing proteins will improve the fetal growth. In fact, only increasing proteins to an extent of more than 20% of the energy requirements might have negative impacts of further decreasing the fetal growth. So one needs to be careful in using additional nutritional supplements without guidance. So an optimal calorie intake as per the weight gain is always recommended even when we notice fetal growth restriction. The diet should include all the essential fats, as we just heard from Ravlika, good quality proteins, as we also heard when you have anemia, iron, zinc, and vitamin rich foods like fruits and vegetables, dairy products, and nuts and oil seeds. They're all needed in the right proportion to support optimal fetal growth.
Thank you, Dr. Lata. Actually, thanks a lot for bringing up the topic of assessment. We understand how important a detailed assessment or diet history is, because this is going to help a dietitian understand what are the nutritional deficiencies, and only then an optimal diet in the food portions required for that individual is important, right? So pregnancy diet is not a standard diet. Every trimester cannot be like giving papers, you have 1800 calorie, 2000. It is a customized diet based upon the nutritional assessment. And thank you for reinforcing the point that it is just not a high protein diet, but it is a complete balanced diet with different food groups. So now with this, we move ahead to our next speaker, Ms. Asma Sajid, and she is going to help us understand the phase of adulthood. Welcome, Asma. So we know, Asma, that adulthood is a phase wherein an individual is going through a lot of stress, lifestyle changes, job responsibilities, parenthood. So all these factors definitely can increase the risk of certain conditions. So can you let us know, like, what are the concerns that peak up in this age?
Yes. Now, when we say adulthood, it's a period of human development in which full physical growth and maturity is attained. So the common concerns which come in adulthood can be overweight or obesity, like how Sumrana has discussed recently in the adolescent growth, that overweight or obesity, eating healthy diet is more important. So that carries on a cycle till the adulthood. So overweight, obesity might be a risk factor for various other non-communicable diseases, which can be diabetes mellitus, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, osteoporosis, or cardiovascular diseases. So these are few what we can name them.
Yes, Asma, unfortunately, India has been the diabetic capital of the world. So with the prevalence of diabetes and CVDs these days, let us know a few interventions or guidelines with which we can reduce the risk of these NCDs in our life.
Yes, when we say the intervention, usually maintaining a healthy BMI, the body mass index, is more important. Either overnutrition or undernutrition is not good for health. So maintaining an ideal body mass index by taking healthy food choices, avoiding junk foods, distribution of the nutrients, when we say calories, carbohydrate count, then protein, fat, all the macro as well as micronutrients which come into picture is more important. So as Dr. Lata said, initial assessment of any person who comes for a dietitian is more important, because we understand actually what is their food choices, what are the preferences, how, when do they get up, what is their lifestyle, whether basically it is an active lifestyle or a sedentary lifestyle, because we know that most of us, even this COVID time, are going ahead with sedentary lifestyle, where we go for desk work and there is a reduced in physical activity. So reducing in physical activity again is a risk factor for various non-communicable diseases. So the person has to be physically active. As per the guidelines, it is 150 minutes to 300 minutes per week. That is, we say 5 hours at least for a week, where moderate intensity exercise or physical activity has to be there to have your ideal BMI. And yes, of course, health check is more important. So when we see nowadays in corporate sectors as well as educational institutions, there are pre-employer health checks and annual health check, which is there. So an individual can monitor on their health status. So before we end up in any non-communicable diseases, you get an alarm of how to manage your further lifestyle.
Definitely, Asma. Yes, in this phase, annual screening is very important so that you can understand if you are at the risk of any of the disease and can manage it at the initial level itself. So this makes us to understand that having a healthy weight and a good lifestyle can go a long way to prevent these NCDs in the future. One more concern, Asma. So the calcium and vitamin D deficiency that is seen in this age, it can lead to osteoporosis and various concerns in the later life. What are some easy ways with which we can include them in our daily life?
Yes, likely said, Farisa, calcium and vitamin D are important for bone density. So deficiency in these might lead to osteoporosis, or there'll be chances of fractures and all. So it's more important that we focus on the rich sources of dietary calcium. Like, for example, when we say calcium, you get different sources. But when we look into the absorption factor, the bioavailability, then it is milk and milk products which has to be focused. So either taking milk or taking some curds in the form of, if the person is not able to tolerate milk. Now again, we get the concerns that in adulthood, people have lactose intolerance, and they might not be able to take milk. So we can replace it with either curds or buttermilk and various other sources. And apart from this, when we say vitamin D, it's not only important for calcium absorption, it's also important because the deficiency of vitamin D might result in insulin resistance and might also impact the cardiovascular diseases. That's the reason people should go for at least when we say walk or exposure to sunlight, 5 to 10 minutes between 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. so that 5 to 10 minutes exposure of sunlight is more important. Apart from that, you have dietary sources also, like you have seafoods and egg yolk and others, and for vegetarian sources too. If in case we feel that the person is not able to take these calcium or vitamin D enough in their dietary pattern, then they can look out for supplementation with an advice by the physician.
Yeah, so we have got a clear outlook like what are the calcium sources, and if at all you are deficient towards the calcium sources from which the bioavailability is best, that is the milk and milk products, then what are the alternatives? And also to add for the Asma's point about the vitamin D, you need to get exposed to the sun, bare skin without any sunscreen. Yes. So thank you, Asma. This reinforces the importance of good diet and healthy life before the beginning. Here we come to an end of the session, and now is the time that we take live questions from our viewers. Well, Dr. Lata, this is the question for you. Like, there is an anonymous attendee who wants to know that the child is a girl, 4.5-year-old here, and the weight is around 12.5, and how to improve her weight gain. So 4.5-year child and around 12.5 kg, they want to improve the weight.
As first thing to remember here is assessing again to see why is there a slow weight gain. So we start right from, was the birth weight adequate, gestational age adequate, was this a preterm baby or normal? So based on, I assumed if we take this as a normal birth at gestation, normal gestation age, the weight gain will be supported with assessing whether what she is eating right now. So if we find a deficiency in her total calorie intake, we would need to support her. So unless we do an assessment of what she is eating right now, based on that, her likes, dislikes, need to also check if there are clinically any concerns. So biochemical parameters like is she anemic will also need to be checked. So I would advise you to actually come down for a consultation, meet a qualified dietitian, and we can actually plan a customized plan for her, which would gradually help her gain weight.
So it's not just eating extra calories, just adding on extra times problematic. This is the maximum growth phase of the child. She is going to be increasing her physical activity. She will be exploring the world more. So you cannot expect her to sit down and eat. So we need to make the food more presentable to her, appropriate. Making the food more dense would become very important. If she is eating only 1 cup of her porridge or her cereal, we need to see how do we make it more nutrient dense. So I will just take a simple example here for the benefit of all the viewers to tell that if I'm giving in a cup of rice with dal, I would actually change that to be given as a khichdi, so that you are giving that the right proportion of rice to dal along with vegetables, adding in a dash of ghee, and then also seeing to it that is given along with curds. So what we need to remember is that proper blend of seeing that we are including all the vitamins, minerals, good fats into it, and a probiotic also, which would help in absorption. Same thing with chapati. If the child loves chapati, blend in some paneer, green leafy vegetables into the roti and make it. So these are simple ways how, but no single diet will fit all. We need to customize it to the child's requirement based on the present intake. So I would advise you to meet a qualified dietitian, and then we can support in helping her improve on her weight.
Thank you, Dr. Lata. Asma, we have a question and you could do this. Diet consideration for asthmatic children. What to avoid, what to include?
Yes. Now, when we say diet restrictions, food allergies are something where we need to look into the detailed assessment for this. So observe the pattern of eating of the child, because some of the foods, like the child might be allergic to sometime milk, or it can be some specific fruits and vegetable. But a well-balanced diet, having a composition of fresh fruits and vegetables is important. Having a source of protein and calcium and vitamin D also plays a very important role, because something food allergies or food intolerances is where the baby's autoimmune system starts reacting there. So you need to see that you're exposing the baby to the sunlight, or including some vitamin D rich sources in the diet in the form of an egg yolk, or if it is a non-vegetarian, seafoods to some extent. But try to find out the foods which are really allergenic, like for example peanuts. The child might be allergic to peanuts. That's the reason we say that when we start complementary feeding, or when we start up the children with food, we ask them to, as per the guidelines, it's restricting them for allergenic foods like cow's milk or peanuts, at least for 9 months to a year, we say. So making like an food diary, like making an elimination kind of diet. So you are introducing one food for them, and then based on their tolerance, you either eliminate that diet from that component from their food. Otherwise, if the baby is able to tolerate, you can reintroduce that. So don't carry a lot of myths that only banana causes asthma, or orange causes asthma. It's not like that. Or curd causes asthma. So it is various different foods. What you have to make a note, have monitor what are the symptoms, what are really aggravating, and accordingly we can plan out.
Thank you, Asma. Sumrana, you have dealt with PCOS and PCOD, so we have a question coming up for you. What is the difference between PCOS and PCOD? Now, I have pimples and low blood flow during periods. Do I have PCOS or PCOD?
So the difference between PCOD and PCOS. So PCOS is a polycystic ovarian syndrome. It is a hormonal imbalance. So it's a syndrome which might have a concern, or the concerns of acne problem, or the concerns of weight gain problem. Whereas polycystic ovarian disease is a concern of hormonal imbalances that have been over the period of time. So the concern that you have of acne or the low blood flow can be a cause of PCOS. And the modifications that you can do for your dietary interventions would be, make sure you follow or have a healthy weight management, and please try to incorporate on a healthy diet, and have a balance of good nutrients such as antioxidants, so that you have so that you receive a good remedy for the concern of acne. Apart from that, exercise to make sure that you maintain a proper weight, and because if there is an increase in the weight, you will have this hormonal dysfunction that might lead to acne problem.
Yes, thank you, Sumrana. And to add to Sumrana's inputs, I would say that there is no single test for understanding whether it is PCOS or PCOD. You need to be physically examined by the doctor. There has to be ultrasound and various blood tests to help diagnose that. Thank you. And then, okay, Ravalika, this is for you. Could you please tell a diet plan for weight loss post pregnancy? So this is the core and more that we have been handling here.
Yes. So it all depends on how old is your baby again here if you're planning for a weight loss, because for a few mothers who would be still breastfeeding the babies, the nutritional quality should never be compromised here. So the calorie restriction should be done according to her BMI. It should be not a strict, low restricted or never crash diets though. So it's all individualized basis. Keeping in mind all the nutrient requirements that you are getting, and also it should be a healthy weight loss that we usually recommend in postnatal time.
Thank you, Ravalika. Dr. Lata, again a question to you. 7 months old baby, basically being breastfed. Can you suggest an ideal solid diet plan? So I guess it's weaning that they want to know.
True, exactly. So 7 months is the time when we start supporting the baby's nutrition with complementing the baby's nutrition
Pregnancy.
along with breast milk. Okay. So what we look at here is the introduction of foods should be in a phased out manner. You always start introducing solids with a single grain, what we say a mono grain. So either you start with rice, which is soaked, dried and powdered. So you need to process it. You can't just take it as such. Or it's malted, what we say, which is soaked, sprouted and dried and powdered. So you can either use rice flour, you can use processed ragi malt, or you can use sprouted wheat flour as the initial first grains that you start, and then move on to make it a dual grain, wherein you can add to the cereal, that is one of these, you add a pulse. So the combination of a cereal to a pulse enhances the quality of the feed. So the way you introduce the solids should be first the type of grain. Second, the consistency that you're making the gruel is also important. So the baby is initially used to only the milk-like consistency. So for 1 week, you give the rice feed as thin milk-like consistency. Then move on to thicken it, and thereafter make it more porridge. So over the phase of from 7th month to 9th month, you are introducing various grains, changing the consistency of the food, and adding adequate vitamins and minerals in the form of vegetables, fruit purees, that has to go along with this. So it has to follow a proper blend. Always introduce one new food at a time so you know how it is then. So this way, the ideal solids that the baby would require along with continuing on breastfeed would help. Yeah, you're saying weight gain and P count is good, so that's fine. But definitely the introduction of solids should be such that the weight gain in the same pattern, it should follow in your growth chart when you're plotting your baby's growth. It should follow the same trajectory even after you're started on your complementary or on your solid foods.
Thank you, Dr. Lata. Thank you for the detailed weaning explanation. We have the next question, and Asma could take this. Asma, the question is, are there any foods that should be avoided during pregnancy?
This is actually a commonly asked question that we should we
Yeah.
avoid particular food. So as discussed by Ravalika in the session, it is like a well-balanced diet, having a plate, because we say that the quality of diet is more important in pregnancy and starting from your pre-pregnancy weight or BMI. So if you fall into a normal weight BMI category, then what should be your ideal weight gain? We need to focus. And then that extra food and whatever is required, the 350 calories when we say, is the quality of diet. So avoiding one particular food might not be ideal, because we have lots of myths in Indian tradition that papaya should not be taken because it's a hot food, or vitamin C rich fruits like when we say citrus fruit should not be taken because that might cause again cold to the baby. So all these are some of the myths where we have to say that these can be included, because when we say papaya, it's a source of beta carotene. So taking papaya, a slice of papaya in combination with some other fruits, like maybe a mixed fruit bowl with papaya, watermelon and apple, or some other locally available foods, will be an ideal snack option. Similarly, when we say vitamin C rich fruits, again, no food causes any harm to the baby, because baby is protected again in the womb by many layers. So it's the nutrients which goes to the baby there. It's not directly the hot or the coldness of the food. So we have to focus on a balanced diet with all the nutrients, then looking into these.
Thank you, Asma. Ravalika, one question for you. Like, I have a 5-year-old boy and he has got glasses or spectacles. So, any food to improve his vision?
Yes, it is always vitamin A and beta carotenoids that takes care about good vision and healthy eyes. So inclusion of beta carotenoid foods, which are rich yellow or orange colored fruits and vegetables, and vitamin A from inclusion of egg and poultry, all this has to be included in the child's diet. Of course, keeping those also along with this protein and other good healthy fats also should be taken, which ensures better growth of the baby.
Thank you, Ravalika. I think this is the concern of many mothers because of the increased screen time and the gadgets being used. All right. So, Dr. Lata, we have Dr. Kavita asking us, how do we plan a balanced plate?
Dr. Kavita, I can't tell you in a single line of how do we plan it, but very simply, I would say there are majorly 5 food groups that we always look at to make a plate balanced. So the cereals and millets, or I would say the grains, take in the major portion, where you have to take in almost, if you take it as a pyramid, it is a base, or if you're taking a plate as you asked me, it would be your half a plate coming in with the grains. The fruits and vegetables should take in the next level. Now, always take whole grains as your option, whole fruits and vegetables as again to be included, and vegetables specifically both raw as salads and as the cooked vegetable, because always there are various nutrients that you get in both those options. The fourth group is definitely the milk and milk products. You have the required or the limited quantity wherein we talk of sugars, we talk of fats and oils. So for each of the physiological age, starting from infancy, childhood, adolescence, and adulthood, as we were discussing today, the plate proportion varies. So based on the total nutritional requirement, the balanced plate will always be these food groups. But the proportion that is given varies for each of the physiological age. So a balanced diet should have at every meal all these food groups involved. And then how we blend it to form a right combination is what makes it for better absorption. We were just sharing in our earlier discussion on how if you want your iron from your food to actually reach the blood, it has to be going in along with a good quality protein and vitamin C. I find most of the time when everyone find that they are anemic, they're actually rushing out to eat what is iron rich food. But everyone, please remember, more than iron-rich foods, it is the protein content of your diet which will help in iron absorption. Hemoglobin, the globin is a protein. So if you want your hemoglobin to improve, it's the protein. So it is a blend of 2-3 nutrients, and that is what comes in a healthy plate.
Thank you, Dr. Lata. Ravalika, this is a question coming to you. It's part of conception and preconception. So we have Rubina asking us, I had in my earlier pregnancy sugar, just a unit high, and doctor had advised to control it through the diet. And again, she's pregnant, so she wants to know what is the food that she can take so that she might not get diabetes and BP again in this pregnancy. So, okay, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, the occurrence of gestational diabetes in the pregnancy would be actually followed by a risk factor relating to previous history of gestational diabetes or a strong family history of diabetes. So in such cases, a woman can take care about her diet, restricting the intake of any simple sugar or processed foods. It could be like, all this jams, jellies, or processed food, preserved food. Like since Rubina is also concerned about her high BP, I recommend to restrict on the intake of high salt rich foods as well. So the recommendation of salt in pregnancy is 5 grams. Never go on a low salt diet while you're having your pregnancy. It is just recommended that the additional salt that it should be avoided, like avoiding any kind of preservative foods, like it could be Maggi, noodles, or pasta, or papads, pickles, any preserved foods like soya sauce, ketchups. All this should be avoided while you're at the risk of developing high BP in pregnancy.
Thank you, Ravalika. And now, Dr. Lata, again a question to you. We have a core Rasagnya asking us, like her weight is 114 kgs at present and she is pregnant. How to lose weight? So weight loss in pregnancy.
First thing to remember, we do not plan weight loss in pregnancy. I understand from your weight, and then I don't have your height. So if your body mass index is definitely above 28, there needs to be a restriction in your weight gain in pregnancy, but not a weight loss. So if you're telling me you're at 114, we need to still support you by taking a good diet, again balanced in all the food groups. What needs to be limited are all those empty calorie foods that we talk of. That is, foods which are very high in fat, salt, and sugars. Yes, these have to be avoided. So they are basically all the processed foods, anything made from white flour, or that's the maida, so semia, noodles, pasta. Yes, you can avoid all of these. You also need to avoid on foods which are excess in sugar. So anything preserved, anything added on with terms of, preserving it, like the jams, jellies, or pastries. For that matter, I would always advocate to avoid all baked products. One, it's made from maida. Second, you have the hydrogenated fat, which actually causes more harm, and of course, excess sugars. So all baked products, including the breads, biscuits, and rusk, also it's preferred to be limited or avoided. Now, having said that, what you eat, again, should be a blend of your cereals, that is, let it be whole grains, let there be enough vegetables coming in, let there be fruits taken whole and not fruit juice. Most mothers always ask us, ma'am, fruit juice is better, isn't it? Absolutely not. You need to be ready and prepared to always monitor your weight. A weight gain should not be more than 200 grams per week from the second trimester. So we are looking at a weight gain of less than 1 kg every month from the 4th month onwards, and either it can be a static weight or a limited weight gain or a restriction in weight gain. But monitoring your intake every month would help in improving on those particular food groups which are getting missed out. No need to avoid milk and milk products, only shift your type of milk to double tone milk or the tone milk where the fat percentage is less, but you can absolutely take your milk and milk products too. Of course, a customized diet plan will be more helpful, so do meet your qualified dietitian nearby so that it will be helpful for you.
Thank you, Dr. Lata. Asma, few questions coming related to pediatrics to you. Okay, so the first is, when can I introduce an egg to the baby?
When we say egg, it's ideally first when we follow a pattern of feeding them, starting with the rice-based meal, then moving on, introducing wheat and wheat products or fruits and vegetables, we say, and then coming to egg yolk. So when we start a baby, an egg, it cannot be directly an egg. So start with the egg yolk. Try to give 1/4 of the egg yolk in the first week. See the tolerance of the baby. From we can start egg yolk by 8th month, so we can see how the baby is tolerating. You can mix it with the any meal probably, so mash it and give and observe for 2 days. Then you can increase the quantity, because any taking complementary feeding pattern, gradually introducing them and waiting and then going for the next food is more ideal. So we can do it in that way, and then increase the quantity after 2 days, and then after probably after 8th month end we can start it with egg white. So some of why we start from 9th month is initially we had a question for asthma, and also so few of the allergenic components when we look into is egg white is an albumin, so we start after 9 month. And yes, of course egg yolk can be started from 8th month onwards, but going with a gradual quantity is more advisable.
All right, one more thing about introduction of food. Can we introduce potato for 8 months baby?
Yes, we can, but how you introduce is more important, because potato is a tuber. You need to first wash it, boil it, peel it, and then mash and then feed the baby, because it cannot be in other form. So cooking method is more important. So using it with the help of any khichdi form, you're mashing it in that way, or giving it as a snack, sweet potato or a boiled mashed carrot would be an ideal snack or meal too for the baby.
One more thing, salt and sugar for babies below 1 year. Is it strict no or can be offered occasionally?
So it's better we go for strict no. But when you give a combination of different foods, like when you give the baby a khichdi, so when you combine vegetables along with the rice and dal combination, you definitely get a flavor. Like when you use carrot or some sweet potato, you get that natural sweeteners in the food. So it's better we do it. At times, yeah, salt intake probably from for some recipes, limiting it to the extent like you're having a controlled portion and then you're using, it's fine. But again, sweet and all, it's better we have a control on them, because we have noticed many of the babies coming with dental caries and cavities, and also it's better we cut down on those.
Thank you, Asma. Sumrana, something related to PCOS and PCOD. So Mohima wants to know, what are the foods which are advised and restricted in PCOS and PCOD?
Yeah, Mohima, as we have discussed, like in PCOS and PCOD, there are the chances of concerns about some risk of obesity or diabetes or increase in the cholesterol level when the weight increases. So from that aspect, I would recommend you, like we need to make sure the combination of meals that you're looking at should be something which will take care of these concerns, such as like in order to reduce the amount of sugars, we can go like simple things, like we can shift our change of the carbohydrates. Like instead of going with simple white rice, we can shift towards the brown rice, or maybe we can have inclusion of chapatis, etc., which will help in adding on a complex carbs option. Apart from that, we can go with any lean meat protein sources of like such as beans or vegetarian proteins or chicken, fish, rather than just adding on a high fat meat to cut down on the fat intake in the diet. Apart from that, please make sure, like I already updated, we can also include antioxidants in the form of fresh fruits and vegetables as well. Like Dr. Lata ma'am has already suggested, please make sure fruits as well, in order to reduce the amount of sugar. We can take a whole fruit rather than making a juice form to cut down on the sugar intake of the fruit. And apart from the dietary modification, please also take care of your exercise and physical activity. Simple exercise or physical activity of minimum of 30 minutes also has a positive effect. So these are some of the recommendations that we can go ahead with PCOS or PCOD concerns.
Thank you, Ravalika. Dr. Lata, a question for you. Is it compulsory for a morbid obese person with BMI of 41 to have a bariatric surgery? Or is it possible to reduce the weight with diet and exercise and no surgery?
Hania, this question is dependent on the other metabolic parameters also. So, a morbidly obese person, we also need to analyze whether they have other metabolic problems. So, diabetes, having hyperlipidemias, any of the other comorbid conditions, if it is there. So, you need to meet your physician who would take a call on whether it is. So the recommendation definitely stands that BMI above 35 has to go in for bariatric surgery. Now, only dietary modifications, will it help? It's dependent on, as I said, all these other parameters. So first you need to get your clearance from the physician to say that yes, you don't have other comorbid conditions, so you could try out on reducing weight with diet and exercise. But recommendations definitely stands that any BMI above 35 is a candidate for bariatric surgery.
Thank you, Dr. Lata. Ravalika, a question for you. Vegetarian sources of B12. What are the vegetarian sources?
B12 is something which is commonly found in non-vegetarian sources, but for the vegetarians, they would be missing it from those. So they can include good amount of dairy products like milk, curd, or in the form of buttermilk or paneer, or they can go for soya milk as well. So other than this, there is also fortified cereals that they can get. So in which fortification is something that the absent nutrient is added to some particular food. There are some fortified breakfast cereals that they can choose as an option to get this B12 in the diet.
Thank you, Ravalika. Dr. Lata, there is a question for you with the name. Like Hajra wants to ask only Dr. Lata Shashi ma'am. Like, how does deficiency of calcium during pregnancy affect the pregnant women and the growth and development of the newborn in his life or later in the life? Deficiency of calcium during pregnancy. Yeah.
Hajra, first thing I would need to know when you're saying deficiency is your blood levels, your serum levels of calcium, is it low, right? Because just symptoms of calcium deficiency are not what we are looking at. Because in pregnancy, there's already 1000 milligrams of calcium that is given. If you're not able to take that, then we need to look at. Now, it's very rare that you would have the deficiency impacting the fetus because we do have supplements that's given. And if the supplements are not being taken for any reason, we need to support through the dietary intake. So what impact it will have is calcium is an important nutrient for supporting on the fetal bone health. So it's not just bone, anything related to it would have. And calcium has an important mineral in various other links. It's not just bone health. As we just heard, it's linked to vitamin D and hence hypertension. So you will find it working like a hormone along with vitamin D. So it cannot be that is there only one impact. But having said that, it doesn't mean that just because calcium was less, will it have a long-term effect? You will not be able to. Please understand that nutrients and foods, what we eat, comes in as a whole. It's not that one food gives us only one nutrient. So you would be getting the benefit if you eat a diversified diet. That's why we always recommend get your nutrients from the dietary sources than from the supplements, so that you're getting food diversity is there. So what you're missing out in one food, you'll get from the other. So as long as you're eating your vegetables, you're eating your green leafy vegetables, you're eating some milk products, you are getting in your calcium. So how much impact it will have on the growing baby can only be judged as the baby grows and assessment done. You cannot outright, in my opinion, tell before itself, so these are the list of things that will happen to the baby.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, Dr. Asma, a question for you. What is the best food for diabetic patients? Question about adulthood.
Now, when we say adulthood, one best food, we cannot limit ourselves to one best food for a diabetic. the choices, the food preferences is more important. So when we say for diabetic, it is low glycemic index foods, or we say good fiber foods along with the proper distribution of protein and fat, a balanced nutrition is more important. So having a plate wherein we say that you have a bowl of a salad with appropriate amount of your cereal in the form of, if you're taking a roti and rice combination, also how you eat is more important. So taking your salad first and going for a protein option, like if you're non-vegetarian, taking that egg white or chicken 2 or 3 pieces and then having roti with some sabzi, or you're having little white rice, is absolutely fine. So how you eat, the pattern of eating is more important here. So if it is uncontrolled diabetes going to a level of HbA1c more than 10 and all, then proper monitoring is required, that what are the foods which is really causing insulin resistance. So it can be sometime pulka, which might increase your blood sugar level. So shifting on to wheat rava or some soluble fiber in the form of oats can be taken. So it's better you go for a certified dietitian who will assess your intake, who will check your food preferences based on your blood sugar values, can modify your diet so that the target values can be achieved.
Thank you, Asma. One more question for you. What is the food to be taken for overcoming hypothyroidism? And
Yeah.
how can I improve this condition before pregnancy?
Okay. When we say hypothyroidism, again, it's like a vicious cycle. As Dr. Lata said, a hormone which is responsible. So similarly here, there is a hormone which is responsible for that weight gain pattern. So first of all, the person who is hypothyroid might end up in weight gain, and again it will be a PCOS. So maintaining a balanced weight, and how can you do that? It is ideal body mass index can be maintained by following a proper nutrients, a well balanced diet, and again restricting. If you are even taking Thyronorm as a medication, there you need to you can still have cabbage, cauliflower, or soya products to a limited portion size, because the portion control is more important rather than excluding them from your diet. Because if a person is vegetarian and they are going for soya products or dal or paneer as a source of protein, there you cannot completely eliminate now soya because you're having a hypothyroidism. So it's better you limit. So based on your weight, based on your age group, limiting the quantity how much you're taking, because it can be like 20 grams or 25 grams, so that you might be not taking every day. So even when you look into cabbage and cauliflower, these are the rare vegetables. It's not in what you use it every day. So hardly you will take it weekly once or twice. And how much you'll take it? It is less than 100 grams probably. So those quantities will not imbalance the hormonal changes there. So these can be included. That's the reason again and again we say that whatever the condition you have, please visit your certified dietitian so that she can do a detailed assessment of your condition, what it is, based on your weight gain pattern, based on your ideal body weight, based on your age group. They can decide, and based on your physician recommendation, then they can give you a tailor-made diet which will be really beneficial.
Thank you, Asma. Dr. Lata, a question for you. How much weight does a baby should gain after starting solids on an average? And how do I understand that my baby is eating enough? So Alekhya wants to know this.
Alekhya, weight gain in a baby is always plotted on a growth chart. So I think you would already be having your baby's growth chart, and you need to plot the baby's weight for age, height for age across, and see how the growth trajectory is. So even after you look at, it is not that it is fixed like we say for adults. It's not fixed that you have to gain 200 grams, 300 grams. It's always in the trajectory. So suppose the baby from birth till 6 months is moving in the path of the centile below 50th centile. While you continue giving solids also, when you're monitoring the weight every month, it should increase in the same trajectory. That is the best way of monitoring the growth. Yeah. Was there one more question to that?
I see only this.
Okay.
Yeah. Ravalika, a question for you. What are the practices to be done to control vomitings and nausea during pregnancy?
Nausea and vomiting in pregnancy is one of the common symptoms that every woman experiences. So this is due to some hormonal imbalances that happens in her body. So during with this phase of time, usually the woman, what she does is completely avoiding all different kinds of foods which she's not tolerating to, or she tries to keep her on empty stomach with the fear of she may puke later. But that is actually the faulty habit. She actually have to include foods to up to every second hourly interval. Empty stomach might again increase that level of flatulence in her stomach, which gives that nausea sensation. So splitting her meals up to every second to third hourly interval should be very much beneficial. And one more thing that she can do here is she can either have good amount of liquids. So again, when I talk about liquids here, water is something that usually people assume about, but it's not only the water that we usually recommend. It can be any other kind of flavored liquids as well. When I say flavored liquids, it could be like infusion liquids, like inclusion of some mint leaves in it or adding some cucumber. All this gives some flavor which will not allow the nausea enzymes to generate more. So in this kind of modification of having either coconut water or homemade soups, all this also can be incorporated. So coming to diet, if they have to see the regular pattern of diet that they usually have at their home, would be little this woman would find aversions to it. So modifying their cooking methods at times may increase the palatability and acceptance of the food. So example, if they're just not feeling good to have some white rice, they can add some flavor in the form of addition of green leaf vegetables, like adding some methi or palak, or make some palak rice or chapatis. Also they can add some greens in it, and adding little seasoning of this would be increasing the acceptance and palatability when they're going away from the regular routine way of eating. So all this would be actually helping them to relieve from this nausea and vomiting symptoms.
Thank you, Ravalika. Asma, a question to you since you brought the point of pandemic. How can we manage your weight in this pandemic as it is leading to sedentary lifestyle?
Yes, this is a very good question. So as I said, even maintaining the physical distancing, you can still go for a walk. So at least that 150 to 300 minutes of moderate physical activity, what you can practice either in the form of a walking or what you can do it at home with a trainer support. Nowadays you have online sessions which is being conducted by most of the trainers, the physiotherapists and all, so you can go for that even to keep yourself busy and keeping away yourself for that particular time from the screen, or whether your screen time for television or your work schedule also, that gives really a break. And again, along with the physical activity, following a well balanced diet, inclusion of all the food groups which is locally available is more important here.
Thank you, Asma. A question for you, Dr. Lata. A lot of people have suddenly started talking about garden cress seeds or halum seeds, super beneficial food for women in reproductive age. How true is the hype, and how much should one consume to see visible results?
The garden cress seeds or halim seeds are seeds which have been available for quite some time. It's not something that came up now. It's only that in this part of our country, down south, it was not used much, but down in Maharashtra and the regions, it is being used quite normally. It's considered a good source of iron, and of course, a seed, all of us should understand, is always a good blend of proteins, essential fats, and this particular seed has iron also. Now, any seed, when taken, especially now in pregnancy, should not exceed more than a teaspoon per day. And nuts and oil seeds together, the recommendation in pregnancy is not to exceed 20 grams. So it just doesn't mean that you only taking garden cress seeds. We always need to look at what are the other nuts and oil seeds that you're including in your diet. So altogether, be within the limit of less than 20 grams and then have a proper combination. But specifically, any seed recommendation is not more than a teaspoon a day.
Thank you, Dr. Lata. A question for you, Sumrana. Good evening, ma'am. I'm facing a lot of hair loss. Can you please suggest a good and healthy food and some suggestions for hair growth?
So basically, the nutrients that we suggest for a better hair growth or for hair, like to prevent hair loss, would be such as zinc, selenium, iron, and biotin. So if I tell you in a simpler form, you can, if you're a non-vegetarian, you can go with an inclusion of egg along with the yolk. One whole egg can be taken. Along with that, you can concentrate on all the types of dals like lentils or whole grams, chana, rajma, like this kind of whole legumes options can be incorporated in the diet. Along with that, omega-3 fatty acid sources such as nuts like walnuts, almonds can also be incorporated for the hair. Like if I tell you in a more simpler form, it is like to maintain the shininess and the a proper hair maintenance. These are some of the nutrients that we recommend.
Thank you, Simrana. Asma, we have Rohin Ahmed, and they want to know, like, if Chinese food can be included in pregnancy in the first trimester, can a pregnant lady have Chinese food?
Okay, now when we say either a Chinese food or a junk food here, first of all, in this pandemic, when we are taking and or ordering an outside food, we must be careful from where you order at. And then when you order from a hygienic place and you're sure about that it comes into a licensed group where they give you an assurance for the safety protocol what they are following in COVID, you can have, but it is the quantity what you take. So you're craving for Chinese food today, yes, of course you can go for that, again in a limited quantity. Have a bowl of if in case it's a Chinese food like noodles and all, inclusion of vegetables, some salads along with that, and then going for the protein option into that. So how you're taking the chicken with that and then going for small amount, probably 30 grams of that noodles what you eat in a small bowl is more important again. But you're having the people might have craving for Chinese food today, and again tomorrow it might be some other junk food. So we need to have a control on our craving and the portion sizes what we eat. So that I would say.
Thank you, Asma. Ravalika, we have a question from Shiv Kumar, and he wants to know, ma'am, can we reverse pre-diabetic condition? HbA1c is around 6.3 with diet and lifestyle modification. A good question, actually.
Yeah, diabetes is not something when occurred cannot be reversible, but it can be very well managed with diet and lifestyle modification, like you said, Mr. Shiv Kumar. So when I talk about diet modifications like cutting down or restricting on the simple sugar carbohydrate foods, like it could be white rice or white suji rava upma, all the white products, and inclusion of more amount of whole grain cereals in the form of wheat products, or it could be like dalia or brown rice or oats. And talking about some protein intake also would be managing this maintenance of sugar levels well in the body. So always protein and fiber has very good effect on managing the blood sugars. So always try to include some good amount of good quality proteins from the point of dairy products. If you're non-vegetarian, you can also include some eggs and lean meats in your diet. And fiber rich foods also, like I said, it would be coming from whole grain cereals and also from fruits and vegetables. But here, when we talk about fruits and vegetables, we have to be concerned about high calorie or the fruits which are dense in high calories or simple sugars, like it could be banana, sapotas, and all. So all this would be generally advised to cut down completely, but the recommended proportions is what you have to understand every time. The portion control is important, even if the food which is permitted in pre-diabetic or diabetic conditions, the portion control is what we have to look into here. Just because we can have that particular food when we have this pre-diabetic or diabetic range, that doesn't give any liberty for us to just have that food in very higher amounts. The portion control is what we have to look into here. And like I said, when I was addressing my previous question on gestational diabetes, it applies the same here, like avoiding all the processed simple sugars. It could be like jams, jellies, or any bakery stuff, or any processed food should be definitely avoided. And physical activity, yes. Physical activity, minimum of 30 to 45 minutes of simple walking also should be helping in managing the blood sugars well.
Thank you, Ravalika. A question for you, Dr. Lata. Like a person who is on crash diet and loses their weight, is it going to have a negative effect after they conceived?
How you lose weight before you get pregnant definitely has an impact on your pregnancy. So whenever you are having, as you're suggesting, a crash diet, it depends on how fast you lost your weight and how deficient or how much you were not or you were avoiding on essential nutrients. Like you just heard from our discussion that folic acid before pregnancy is a very important vitamin. So if you were on a crash diet with no vegetables, with all the good sources of folates and fruits being avoided, yes, you run a risk of being deficient in this vitamin when you conceive. So it is always advised that if you have had a lost weight after a crash diet, to take time off for the next 4 to 6 months at least to maintain that weight with appropriate eating of a balanced diet, seeing that you take these specific nutrients. All of you should remember folic acid is a B vitamin, which is a water soluble vitamin, and it has to be taken on a daily basis. It cannot be that you have taken in a pump of, a large dose of folic acid today. You don't need it for the next week. No. So taking a balanced diet with all the essential fruits and vegetables at least 6 months before your conception, if you have been on a crash diet, is what I would advise. Now, there are women who tell us and who have come to me when telling that, oh, I just conceived immediately after losing weight. What we would be doing in our assessment is seeing that are they already having any nutritional deficiencies and supporting them through pregnancy. It's not that once you're pregnant, you don't want to be worried over it. Yes, you would have had a deficiency of certain nutrients, which definitely needs to be corrected. And so please give a proper assessment of your intake and your history to the dietitian who's taking an assessment for actually given that corrective nutrition at least for the next 9 months of your pregnancy.
Thank you, Dr. Lata. One more question to you. Like, ma'am, how can we overcome the hypothyroid problem before pregnancy?
I thought I was just
Yeah,
replying to her.
yes.
Yeah. You need to take in your supplements. Prashanti, did Prashanti write, P. Shanti write this? No, okay. She's also asked on thyroid. I'm suffering with thyroid. I'm using 50 micrograms. Can I include millet? So I'll just answer both these together. Those of you who are hypothyroid, before you conceive, it's very important that you keep your TSH levels in control. So do not skip your medications. Be in touch with your endocrinologist, your physician, to see that you're maintaining your levels well. Because the minute you, after always find it in the hormone. So it's very important to take the best advice I would give you if you're hypothyroid and you're planning for pregnancy is to be in touch, check your TSH levels and take your Thyronorm or L-Troxin supplements adequately. Shanti, including millets in your diet if you're hypothyroid, there is no contraindication that we have come across. Okay, for all those who are hypothyroid and or on supplementation, okay, on medication, the only vegetables that you need to limit are the goitrogenic vegetables, which are cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, and lettuce. Now, these four, yes, you have to keep it less. Limit doesn't mean it's avoid. But in pregnancy, we ask you to avoid because the need for Thyronorm is more. The particular enzyme, hormone is more. So in pregnancy, you will avoid this. Non-pregnant, non-lactating women and all other adults, you can definitely take these vegetables also in small quantities. That is, you take it monthly twice or you take it weekly once, it doesn't matter. Soya products are the other group of foods which a hypothyroid has to keep less. But again, it depends on whether you're pregnant or non-pregnant state. So accordingly, we monitor and decide on the portion size that is given.
Thank you, Dr. Lata. I think one more question to you as well. Like Sema Farheen wants to know, she is a mother of 4-year daughter and she's abundantly going through high count of WBC. Any reason related to diet? as I'm giving milk, non-veg,
I'm
juices, all
sorry.
types of food?
Just asking in a question that Saiba, I would not be able to tell you if it's because of diet. You're giving in everything. So an increase in WBC, you have to meet your physician, take your child to the pediatrician and check on if the clinical parameters are okay on the other parameters also. So it's not just WBC count. We look at the complete blood picture to see if there is any other infection stage that is causing an increase in WBC. So that I would ask you to meet the pediatrician with your with your investigation reports, and you cannot relate it only to, or it cannot be related to diet.
Yeah. So this one is the last question that is going to Asma, because I see many of the questions are repetitive, being on postnatal weight management, then again hypothyroid management, and then we have gestational diabetes weight plan. So most of it is covered through the panelists. Asma, there is an anonymous attendee and wants to know, someone whose creatinine levels are high, and if she's pregnant, how much protein to be given?
Now, it depends on what condition it is. Like you have two conditions, and when the creat is high, we say chronic kidney disease, and the other would be the acute kidney injury, what you have. So, if it is already diagnosed chronic kidney disease and the creat level, if it is high, you know the numbers better. If it is more than 2.5, then it comes to the stage of CKD stage 2, we say. So your nephrologist might have recommended you for a low protein diet, but in pregnancy, to meet the pregnancy demand and fetal growth and development, based on your body mass index, based on your weight gain pattern, your dietitian will take on a call that what should be the protein. It cannot be a low protein there in pregnancy. It will be a moderate protein, including high biological value protein in the form of egg white, chicken or fish, or when you go for plant sources again, dal, the portion sizes has to be planned carefully so that your creat level doesn't fluctuate again. But limiting your fluid intake as per the nephrologist is more important there.
Yeah, Asma, one more question has popped up. Can I suffer fat soluble vitamin deficiency if I'm taking toned milk or double toned milk and not whole milk every day?
Again, which group is it adult?
No, it's just like coming from anonymous attendee who says, can I suffer fat soluble vitamin deficiency if I take toned or double toned milk, not whole milk daily?
See, it's the overall dietary pattern what we follow. If you are a non-vegetarian and you're already having enough of fat recommendation, because if it is an adult, it is 30 ml per day, that is 2 tablespoons of oil which has to be taken to meet the fat requirement, or the visible fat what we say. If it is a non-vegetarian person and already having inclusion of non-veg foods, egg, and then going for tonement, is absolutely fine. You won't be deficient in that. But overall, your diet, whole day's diet matters a lot. If you're not having all these things and you're a pure vegetarian, cutting down on going for a crash diet or a weight loss diet where you're limiting your fat intake and even fat in form of milk, then you might be deficient.
Thank you, Asma. I now invite Dr. Lata to please conclude the session.
That was really very good interaction. I really liked most of the questions that came forth from the participants. In fact, I was just answering Dr. Kavita, who was asking me, gives us insight into what exactly, what our next webinar should be on. Definitely, Dr. Kavita's query was that when you have a family of, people at different age groups, starting from a geriatric age group to a kid who's at 5 years or 7 years of age, how do you plan a balanced diet? It is entirely what we can do for a session. Thank you, Dr. Kavita, for that remark. So we would like to conclude today's session by saying that definitely the health status of every human being is dependent on the nutritional status of his or her mother. Thus, we advocate optimum nutrition for a woman right from the start. That is, from adolescence, before conception, during pregnancy, and so on. And it is hence an investment in the healthy future of mankind. Balance is always the key, both in terms of quantity and quality of diet, physical activity, and lifestyle. Thank you.